All right, guys, welcome to another edition of the ng-conf webinar. My name is Q. I'm an ng champion and a software architect at JB Hunt. I'm so excited to have you all here with us today. We have a fantastic presentation coming your way shortly. Still, before we get started, though, this is an ng-conf sponsored event, and we are a little less than a month away from the biggest Angular conference on the planet, happening June 12th through the 15th at the Little America in Salt Lake City, Utah. So if you can't make it in person, you can still join us virtually. Tickets still available online on the ng-conf website. Finally, the same rules apply here as if we were in person. The code of conduct will be provided in the chat. And to summarize that, just be kind and respectful. If you have any questions, ask it in the Q&A section on the Zoom chat, and we will address those at the end of the presentation. If you have a comment, feel free to post it. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout the presentation. Now, with that out of the way, let's get to it. Our speakers today come from Infragistics. It's a company that prides itself on its desire to deliver simple and beautiful experiences that drive productivity across digital product teams and enables data-driven, high-performing teams across entire organizations. Jason Beres is the Senior Vice President of our developer tools and a national and international speaker in both the developer and UX communities. He's joined by George Abraham, a Senior Product Manager, a Drexel University alum with a PhD in human-computer interaction. In his free time, he watches mystery thrillers and plans cross-country road trips. So with that, I'll hand it over to you guys.
Thank you, Q. All right, let me get situated here. Let me go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. Yes, George and I are from Infragistics. We appreciate everyone's time today. We know you have a lot of stuff on your plate with work and whatnot, and just the fact that you're here today watching this webinar means a lot, and even downstream if you're viewing it after the live webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. What we're going to do today is show a few slides, and then we are going to do some demos and show some code and kind of see how all of this good stuff works. So let me fire up my PowerPoint. And so really the whole idea about today is talking about accelerating app delivery with low code and Figma. My name's Jason, as Q mentioned. George, of course, is our PM. He's the design lead for App Builder. Here's our emails in case you want to follow up with us after the session. Infragistics was founded in 1989, so we have been around for more than 30 years. We're a gold certified partner, a Google leverage partner, Amazon partner, all this good stuff. We have a very large developer tools community that's built up over the years. And we're a global organization. So we have offices over in Japan, in India, in South America, in Western Europe and Eastern Europe, in the UK. So we're all over the place. And we're all over the place to make sure that we can support you with our products and kind of what we're bringing to market. If you've used Infragistics, you know, what we're known for is fast data grids and data charts. And I have Angular here, but every platform you can imagine. We still have lots of Windows Forms and WPF grids out there and product, but Angular, Blazor, React, these are all modern new platforms that many of you are using. And that is what we're here today to talk about, is how to get app delivery accelerated with design to code. So one of the big things that we run into is you have a design team and you have a development team, and how do they work together? After today's webinar, you'll see how we can enable that and how you can accelerate that with not only Angular, but with your design team, with Figma, with Sketch, with Adobe XD. It doesn't really matter. Today, we're going to highlight Figma because it's newer for us. So let's go ahead and get started. So I want to highlight App Builder. That's really what we're kind of excited to show everyone today, to the Angular space. And the idea behind App Builder is that building apps is hard. There's a lot that goes into creating screens, making them responsive, adding properties, doing data binding, and that takes a lot of time. Back in the 90s and the early 2000s, with Microsoft and other vendors, there's WYSIWYG tools that help you build screens, but for the modern web, they really don't exist. So unless you're using a straight up no-code tool, maybe some of the low-code tools, you really don't get that modern WYSIWYG experience. So our goal with App Builder is to bring this fun and easy VB6 or Windows Forms-like experience to your applications. And if we talk about this design to code revolution, it's really about digital product teams. And a digital product team is a team that has, everything from, it's like the full stack team, from design all the way to, the back end and the front end, everyone working to deliver a product to market. Well, you need to be more productive. What we've researched and what Gartner's researched and Forrester's researched is around 60% of an application's dev time is on the user interface. So with that, you have the complex part of CSS, web layout, etc. So how can tooling help you deliver applications faster with the right code, with the right design, so that when you do deploy, you're not dealing with UX bugs and you're not dealing with coding bugs? This is where App Builder comes into play, and this is where our design to code story really comes into play. And you're going to see this live today, and hopefully be pretty amazed at what you'll be able to deliver in terms of an Angular app coming from Figma, or a Blazor app or a web components app. So it's pretty exciting. So one of the things that many of the analysts have talked about is that by 2025, over 40% of app dev will be done using low-code tools. So when we think about low-code, maybe it's not necessarily, all in the developer tool, but it could be in the design tool, like with the Figma. Figma is very mature. It's very robust in terms of designing screens and playing out interactions. But the problem is I need to hand that off to my dev team. How can they translate that into meaningful code that is pixel perfect to what the design is? If you can do that in a low-code tool, then you're accelerating app delivery. Even better, if you can accelerate what the code output is, you're really accelerating app delivery. So with App Builder, what we're bringing to market, you no longer have to choose between the design tooling and the developer tooling. Part of the issue, like, for example, let's say we're using a low-code tool like Power Apps from Microsoft. That's like a developer / citizen developer tool. It's not a design tool. Let's say you're using any number of open source low-code tools or even paid low-code tools. They're not design tools. They are meant for the citizen developer, the power user, or the developer. So where does the design fit in? Well, with what we're bringing to market and what you're going to see today, you don't need to choose between the design tooling and the developer tooling. Everyone stays where they want. I stay with Figma or Sketch as a designer, and the developer stays with Visual Studio Code, JetBrains. It doesn't really matter. App Builder is sort of this thing in the middle that everyone can use to help facilitate this handoff in the app and screen creation. And that's the key aspect here, is that with App Builder and design to code, you can eliminate 100% of bugs in that handoff, which is saying a lot, because a lot of the bugs that customers end up seeing are missteps in here's what the designer designed, here's what the developer produced, and then the customer gets something that's not exactly what was tested with users in that design phase. Even with App Builder and design to code, we run into this at Infragistics. So you'll still see discussions with designers that say, hey, I didn't design that. How did that end up in the application, or how did that end up on the customer's desktop? Well, because maybe there was a misstep in the handoff, and that's really where you find most of those bugs. Tools like App Builder really help alleviate that. And the key here is that everything that is designed, so everything that you're designing in Figma, is backed by a design system with real UI controls. So you have to have this design system, you have to have real UI controls on the other end, and then the tooling in the middle to bring them together. So there are tools out there that say, hey, we'll go from Figma to React. Well, what they're doing is they're producing sort of spaghetti code where you can't maintain it. It's not production ready, but they've interpreted it. So they've interpreted this design file, and they've given you some sort of HTML or JavaScript to render it, but it's not something that you could actually say, yeah, this is ready for prime time. When you do have a design system, you have real UI controls, you can deliver production ready code in those applications. And that's really what we're trying to do here. So the gist, the moral of the story is building these end-to-end apps can take hours or days, not weeks or months. So this screen here that I have, George and another designer, Andy, on our team actually built this screen. So Andy did all the heavy lifting and George did some tweaks to it. And then they uploaded it to App Builder. Then what I got in App Builder was all of this pixel perfect as components with the responsive layout. And I made a few more changes, tweaked a few things, changed how I wanted my master page layout. And then I generated an Angular app. And then in that Angular app, I did some more tweaks, but I was done with that within a day with the whole app, with everything, with data binding, with master detail. And you'll see in the demo today, the code is, there's not a lot of code to make all this happen. And that's really what you need. Your backlog isn't shrinking, it's growing. What people are asking you for isn't shrinking, it's growing. So where can tooling fit in that makes sense into this workflow? So with that, we are going to jump into a demo. The demo script is sort of going to go with George being the designer, and he's going to show the Figma aspect, the design system, how that ends up in App Builder and a little bit there. And then I'm going to kind of take over and show what my App Builder looks like in terms of taking George's design, how I generated code, and just show you what the running application looks like. So we're going to go ahead and kick that off. I'm going to stop my share and I will let George share his screen. Go and take it away, George.
Excellent. Let me put my... So everything Jason said, he kind of used the word design system, and design system became really popular, and it's almost like a dirty word at this point, because a lot of people push out things calling design system, but they end up being very designer focused. And for a true design system to kind of work out for an organization, it needs to be available throughout the whole workflow process, right? So starting from design all the way to how you would actually work on it to add additional functionality, and how developers would actually work on it in terms of their developer UI kit. In the case of Figma, what we have done is that we call it a design system because every single component which is available in the developer UI kit is also available to designers in the designer UI kit, which is Figma UI kit. And what that means is that that design system already describes how the components are, like how they look. It also describes all the variations, the components can actually take. And with that in mind, let me show you how you would get access to it. So if you are if you go to Infragistics, or if you just look for Indigo to Design UI kits, you will find it here. But if you're a Figma user and you go directly inside of Figma, you have to go into the community and just search for our company, Infragistics. And that will actually bring you the search results, which are two things. One is the UI kit, and the other is a plugin. And I'll show you where the plugin actually kicks in. But once you have both of these things downloaded on your machine and you open up the UI kit, this is what the UI kit actually describes. And this is what I meant by saying it has all the components already ready to go. And designers actually spend a lot of energy and effort trying to document everything. So in this case, what you're seeing is a material UI flavored design kit. And with this, you are actually seeing all the variations we are supporting for a component like a button. And the same thing goes for a component like the avatar. And you know the drill, right? Like what it happens for button groups and so on and so forth. So with that UI kit in place, I'm not going to go in through how Figma actually deploys a design kit as a library, which you can use for your designs. But rest assured, I have it installed on my machine. And that is what I use to create this particular UI. From the looks of it, it looks like it's just a normal Figma file. It has all the Figma stuff in it. So what that means is that Figma allows you to do layouts like an auto layout. And if you're anyway familiar with web layouts, it's very similar to Flexbox, right? It's basically saying how the elements inside this design, they're going to link up or style up. And for me to actually create a design, so if, for example, in here, I have this component called a chip, because this chip was added from the UI kit, On the right side, you see everything which the design system exposes as possible variations for the chips, right? So I can say, okay, I want the chip to have a prefix icon. Let me zoom in a little here. I want the chip to have a prefix icon or a suffix icon. All of these variations are actually baked into the UI kit. So you do not actually have to waste any energy, and be assured that when this component is actually passed through that whole workflow of value addition, it'll always be maintained because it's all coming from the same UI kit, right? So in here, if I want to add a brand new component, because I have the library already installed, I can always go in here and say, I need a button. I would just search for a button. And this is my UI kit button, and I can just drop it inside, whatever layouts I have. And then I can just change its style. So I can say, hey, I want this button to be of a contained variant. I do not want it to have a left icon. I only want to have a right icon. Whatever you like to do, you can do it. And we also have all the icons baked in from the material icon set. So if I select the icon here, and this is the notification icon, I can change it to a cake. Why not? And with that, I'm able to create any kind of design using Figma to represent what this application UI is going to look like. Every single thing you're seeing in this UI comes from the UI kit. So this is, for example, a left navigation, a navigation drawer. This is a list. This is a chip. This is the input, text, typography, and all the material type scales are also baked into the UI kit. So when you actually add a piece of text, let me just select this piece of text here, you can see this is all coming from the UI kit again. So you do not actually have to worry about having these building blocks, ready for your purposes. You can just simply select it and change it from here. If I take this design and I say I'm done with this design, typically what happens is that when the development team has to look at it, the old workflow used to be you would share a link to this Figma file, and there is this inspect mode which Figma kind of unlocks. And then the developer can look at it and say, okay, what is this button? Okay, this has this style applied to it, what type it is. It's all documenting everything, and it's giving you some CSS code, to represent what this might look like. But in our case, you never have to do this kind of a handoff, because in this handoff, you're still re-implementing everything. Only difference is that you have a good reference point, right? So in our case, if I have to send it to the designer, or to the developer, I'm sorry, this is where the plugin actually kicks in, right? So once I have the plugin installed, the plugin lets me do a handshake between a tool like Figma and the tool like App Builder. Now, why would I take it to App Builder? There are things Figma cannot let you do, right? Where concepts like data binding, advanced theming, navigation routes, things which you would traditionally expect from an application layout, it's not available inside of Figma. And this is where App Builder can actually kick in. So if I have to now share it with my development team, I do not actually share them a Figma file. I would just say, go to the plugin. I will say, create a new app. And here it'll pull in what the App Builder allows me to do is that I'm connected to this App Builder cloud. And from here, I can select one of the workspaces which I work with JSON on. I'm just picking it here, called OpenFin. And I'm going to name this app ng-conf. And like all great demos, this will go smoothly. So I'm going to hit just create an app. And at this point, what we do is we look at the design, we look at all your auto layouts, all the styles you have applied to it, all the components you've added. We parse everything. And then we create this app for you directly in the App Builder product. So if I click on this link, it's going to fire up my browser. And I'll be able to see the app, right? So this is the exact same app which you were seeing earlier. However, the difference is these are now being transitioned into actual components. And how do I know that? Is if I go into my edit mode, this is the UI surface for App Builder, right? And it looks very similar to a design tool with some differences. And the differences are that this is an actual chart component, right? It is bound to data. So I can change the data to say global electricity demand, and you can see the chart has changed. If I change the type of the chart to an area chart, it's changed. And these are actual components which are being used. And here's again where the design system comes back. I go into my components toolbox, And all the components you see here, the same thing, button, button groups. So it is exactly the same component. And if I select that button, you will see this is an actual button component with the same variations I was showing earlier. So I can add an icon, I can switch its position to the right or left, and everything I wanted to do, even the colors, all of this thing were sucked in from the Figma file. So from a development perspective, all they have to do is like, oh, this data, this grid, I never got any data for it. So I can just remove this grid, or I can add a new grid component. And when I add a new grid component, there are some minimum widths on it. So I'm just going to remove it for now. And this is bound to data too, right? So in this case, I can change this data. So right now it's bound to a demo data source called Northwind. I can change it to customers, and you can see the grid rebinds, and it's a real functioning grid. And I can add other capabilities to the grid, like all the features our grid actually offers, which really strives to deliver highest performance grid for Angular. And I can enable all these features on this grid just by saying, yes, I want editing, I want row editing, row actions, column moving, grouping, all of that stuff I can just enable at a click of a button, which is how we are making the API of the developer component really easy to use inside of App Builder. Now, I showed you a workflow where you're actually pushing in the app from Figma into App Builder, and we did the whole process of parsing through the design, identifying all the components from the UI kits, identifying all the themes from the UI kit. But you do not always have to start from Figma. You can also go into the application directly, create a new app. And here we are offering all the starting points, you can use to accelerate to understand the value of App Builder. One set is the sample apps, which shows how visually rich these apps can be, all created from App Builder directly. Then I have templates, which provide all the navigational structures. So you do not want any content. You just want the structure of the app. And you can actually pick one template from here and get started. And then, of course, we have this whole education process by saying, okay, you still want to do design, import designs from somewhere, you need to get the design system. And we link you to the resources, which will help you get your designs into App Builder. So I'll just give you a quick sense of what it looks like. So I'll just open a sample here. So Jason will definitely pick up from where I left off for that trader app, but I'm just showing you another app here, which shows you all the concepts of, the master view and what the child views look like. This is another master view with the shell of the application. And these are all the child views which reside under it. And the beauty of it is once it's an App Builder, we can also unlock other capabilities inside of App Builder, right? So in this case, I can do theming. So I can switch it with one click. It's all application level themes. So I can switch it out to a completely different look and feel. I can use a different flavor of the theming library, which is like a Fluent based UI kit, Fluent Lite. So you can see that everything is actually done in a very consistent way. So you never have to deal with the pesky CSS and HTML, which goes into creating these things. And in addition to theming, you can, of course, create your brand new theme. And that's what we do here. You can pick your starting colors, your primary and secondary, and we automatically generate a palette for you. And then, of course, when you go talk about data, this is where our open API, anything which is a REST data source, I can actually create a brand new one. So I can do a REST API, and I can connect it to an open API specification. Or if you have something which is in the cloud, I can get it from the cloud directly. So in this workspace, I don't have anything available. So if I pick an external data source, so we have one which is called Northwind, and this is like a Swagger definition I have available. I just copy this link. I go into App Builder. I say, yeah, I want to get my data from Open API. Let's call this Northwind Open API. And I say, get it from a URL. I paste that URL there. And that's it. It got the JSON. And guess what? I have all my endpoints, which I can actually test and query. And then once I have finished all my authorization, which is required, we support the bearer token. And I can actually enable this endpoints to show up inside of App Builder. So in this case, let me just check some data source Jason might have added here. Well, these are very simple endpoints, but the benefit is once it's actually set up, if I want to change the data for any component, like the grid or the chart, all I have to do is just pick that right data source inside of App Builder, right? So I talked about the concept of master views and child views. I talked about all the components, which are the same design kit components we have. And I talked about data sources, which you can add. And everything is kind of wrapped inside what we call a group workspace, right? What that means is that I can invite multiple people. So in this group workspace, we have a few people here. I have Jason, me, and then Andy, and I can invite more people. And then I can add resources which is available for everybody in this group to use. So your team doesn't have to recreate everything all the time. And same thing goes for things like assets, right? So these are assets which were available in the design file. Typically, this is another thing you're actually handing off, one by one, but it's not required in our workflow. So if I go back into Figma and I find another one of those designs which has, a lot of illustrations, all the designer had to do was select that illustration, and using Figma's own way of saying, hey, this one should be marked as an SVG. And that's all they have to do. So next time they go back into the plugin, and I'm going to do it again here, I say create a new app. And again, I'm going to pick the same workspace, SVG, let's leave it like that. I say create an app. It's going to take the design, do exactly the same things I mentioned before, but I'm just showing you this example to show you all the visual assets you've been adding into your designs. They're also parsed directly into App Builder. So now I'm opening the same edit experience. I'm going to preview the app here. I go into my editor. This is the same design. It looks pixel perfect as to what I was showing you earlier. And if I show you into my assets toolbox, these are all the assets which were automatically parsed, right? So next time I'm creating a design or a new app in the workspace, these are shared resources. I can just drag and drop and create my designs from there. Now, the real kicker, which I did not show you till now, is let me just switch to licensed here. If I hit preview, this is what you saw when I was coming in from Figma. But you are also able to see the code this is being generating, right? So as Jason mentioned, we target multiple platforms. In this case, it's been set to Angular. But if somebody wants to change their mind or have a different platform in mind, they can just go in and say, I want Blazor or I want web components. And it switches the code dynamically. So you can get a full sense of what kind of code is being generated and how clean that code is going to be. And the way we have done UI kits and the way we have done the handshake through and through, you do not get junk code inside here. What is a component still shows up as a component, and there is no mystery as to what the component would be. So in this case, if you are all Angular aficionados, so you can see that there's the HTML, there's a TypeScript, and there's an SCSS file which is being generated. However, the style file does not have anything which is relating to the components. It's only dealing with everything required to run the layout. Now, you would think, okay, so this is what the solution does. You can actually just copy this code. So it's a different kind of a handoff. Yes, it's a little easier, but you still have to do it again. But that's not, again, the true story. When I'm ready, like once I have sent the preview URL to my stakeholders, everybody has seen it. And this is actually an app which is running here. So what that means is I can close the code view. And if I click navigation, this is doing the routing, right? So there are components like the drop down. I don't know if everything is designed. Okay, it is. So I have my dialogue. So all of this thing is actually working in the preview. So if I share this link with someone, let me go back to my editor here. I say share. And that'll give me the link. I can send it to someone. They can review this design up front. And from this point onwards, if I really want to start building on it, we have this button called Publish to GitHub. Now, how easy is that, right? I just click Publish to GitHub. I'm already signed in. I'm going to create a new repo here called ng-conf trader. Create my repo. It's all set up. I hit Publish. And at this point, it's going to create the repository, add all the files for me, and then the GitHub repo is live for anybody to clone and work on inside their IDE, which is most probably the workflow Jason is going to show you very shortly. But let me show you what it looks like. I open up GitHub, And now you can see that it's generating a lot more things than what you were able to see in the preview. So there's no copy pasting required for you to run this app. All you need to do is clone this, hit npm install, npm start, and you're in business. This whole app is going to run, and it's going to look exactly like what it looked in the preview. And that is really the secret sauce for us, is we would like to strive to give you pixel perfection without to stress about, is it really going to look like the way it's supposed to look like, right? And going back to App Builder, I'll show you one last trick in the books here. So I made it, I'm making my design, say that I want to change my theme, I change it to a light theme. And if I publish to GitHub again, since the repo link is made, this time I can actually make a pull request. And this means that App Builder can continue to push to that repo, and you have full control over what's coming in from App Builder. And you can leverage everything GitHub helpers to see, okay, what are the files which changed, right? In this case, I just changed the theme, and you can see how clean and minimal that change is between these two apps. So you could be adding more views, adding data sources, adding more routes, not a problem. Everything is handled and packaged nicely inside of GitHub. And even if there are conflicts, right? So say that you made changes to the repo directly, and now you're publishing from App Builder, and this pull request would have conflicts. We would actually surface that right inside of App Builder, letting you know that there are conflicts which you need to resolve. And then you can use GitHub's natural UI in order to maintain those changes. So now that you saw how I got the design from Figma into App Builder, I showed you every component which gets parsed. I showed you layouts getting parsed. I showed you assets getting parsed. I showed you what the code preview looks like. I talked about how data binding would work inside of App Builder. I showed all the things, the variations which we were doing for components inside the UI kit. Same variations you can do inside of App Builder. And the code preview is just a preview, literally a preview for the code, but the real code would happen when you actually see it, and you can evaluate it for yourself, the quality of the output which we produce. Now, with that in mind, let me hand it over back to Jason, and he'll show you the next set of magic, which allows him to go from, from weeks to a few days and hours to create his app.
Thanks, George. What a demo. Cool. All right, if you can stop your share, I will start my share, and we will continue to blow people's mind here. So this is the app, and I'm not going to lie here because you're going to see everything. I did additional work to make this happen. But this is the app that George had in Figma. What I did is I modified the binding, the data binding of this list, which I did in App Builder. I added some code for master detail. So as of today, we don't support like clicking this to go update this. Come back at the end of June and we will fully support that. We're actually building that feature right now, which is like if I click here, this updates and this updates. So I did a little bit of manual code there. I have a grid over here. What I did in my grid is I bound it to some different data. If I click this little chart guy, this opens up another screen where I'm using, we have a dashboarding tool called Reveal, and Reveal is pretty slick. It is, it's basically a self-service BI tool. So you can go and you can create dashboards, and it's drag and drop and change the way things look and whatnot, and do all this in place. I'll discard that. I added another screen in App Builder, which did show a different dashboard. And then I added a screen with a data grid that does all kinds of neat stuff like, grouping. So if I group by type and category here, I've got different groupings, different sections here I can drill into. The nice thing about this grid is basically supports everything that you need from an end user perspective. So here I can do different types of filtering. Let's do something more meaningful. Like, let me type in we'll uncheck that, and I just want to look at South America, so I can apply this, and now my grid was updated with just those results, and I can go back to region, and I can clear this filter, select all here, click apply. Maybe I just want to export this to Excel. This is all built into the grid. There's no lines of code to write anything that I'm showing you here. This is the grid that it just exported. The nice thing is when we export from Excel, we actually export the hierarchy as well. So while there are grids out there that you might say, oh, we can export to Excel, we actually export exactly what the grid looks like, including some of that formatting. So there's a lot of neat things here. You got advanced filtering, but all this stuff, I'm going to show you what I did. So before I get into App Builder, I want to show you two tools that we use, which will be interesting to you. Well, one of them is interesting to you. The other one's just Azure. We built an app called Excel2JSON.io. And what Excel2JSON allows you to do, is it allows you to either upload or create JSON files. And why is that important? It's important because when you're just learning tools like App Builder, you need data, right? And data is often trapped in some database or something like that. You can't get to it. And you know, how do I actually make this so in my application I can get something usable? So in this case, it just created this JSON file for me. What I can do here is click Save File, and it gives me a link. So now I have a link to this file. You can see it's just simple age. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go over to App Builder. You can see that this is the same workspace. It's called OpenFin. We work with a company called OpenFin, and I was doing some demos there. But these are all the things George just added. I'm going to go ahead and do a new app real quick. And I'm going to do one of my favorite templates, just a nav template here. I'm going to go into View 1. I'm going to delete this junk, and I'm going to say, you know, new JSON. And I'm going to hit Control E. Control E brings up our little shortcut, or I could have dragged and dropped from the grid or from the toolbox. And I'm going to add a grid. All right, now this grid has a bunch of data sources that are available to me because I added them here. However, I want to add this new data source that I just created. So we're going to call this ng-conf. I'm going to add a URL. I'm going to Control V here with my URL, click Save, click Select Data. Oh, it pulled in table 1, name and age. Now that's added. It's over here. So let me go to my grid now and just bind it. So there is my grid with name and age. So just like that, I am bound to a grid. I'm going to click Run. Here's my app. It's all got the navigation, and there's my Angular code. So we generate the TypeScript, the CSS, and the HTML. If I don't want to use Angular, let's say my boss says, hey, we're going Blazor. Cool. I'm going to switch over to Blazor, and now I'm in Blazor, and life is good. So if I go back to edit mode, I'm back in this designer. So now the more sophisticated screen that we made was this guy here called the OpenFin Trader. So if I go back to my App Builder, and actually I'm going to show this is part of App Builder. Let's say that I'm going to go my OpenFin workspace. Let's go. I'm here in OpenFin, and I'm going to open up my OpenFin Trader. So now I've got my OpenFin Trader app open. And what I did is I took what George had exported to from Figma into this app, and I created a master view with a few child views. So this is the screen from Figma. So essentially it came across as like a single page. I copied out this and pasted it as a child view. And then I added a few other screens. These are all data bound controls here. My dashboard view, I'm not doing really anything here except adding a component. I've got another playground feed or playground screen. I've got something called FinTech feed, which again is bound to 2,500 rows from my JSON file. And then I've got this other child view here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit delete on this guy. And I'm going to do similar to what I did before. But on this screen, I might want to do something different. So why don't we do a 2-row layout? So we have all these nice preset layouts. Let's do 2 rows. And on the top, I'm going to do a Control E again. And I'm going to add a grid. And on the bottom, I'm going to do Control E, and I'm going to add a chart. So here I've got a chart and I've got a grid. But really what I want to do is show you how easy it is to bind data here. So this grid, I actually want to use some data that I have up in Azure. So in Azure, I've got a web app called Northwind Cloud App. And of course, you can guess it's the Northwind database with all the Northwind stuff. All I have is gets. I don't have any posts, puts, deletes here. App Builder fully supports CRUD. So you can do get, post, puts, deletes. Full data entry, round robin, and App Builder. But I'm just going to grab my URL here, Control C, and I'm going to go back to my app builder. And on this screen, I want to bind, let's say, the customers table. So I'm going to go over to my database here, my database tab. I'm going to do plus, new data source, and I want to do an open API Swagger. I'm going to call this Northwind ng-conf and open API Swagger. I'm going to add my Swagger URL, or I could have uploaded the JSON, but I'm just going to paste this in. Northwind Cloud Azure. This is all public, so you guys can try this as well. I'm going to say save, and I'll leave this the way it is. I want to configure my endpoint. So now you can see that this is essentially a duplicate of all the endpoints that I have available to me. So I can just click the box, and you can see I got a 200 OK back. I'm actually getting data back. This is all good for me. I want this one, customers, customer and suppliers by city, demographics, employees. Data does not match the open API schema. So what we do is if there's something funky, like maybe there's a data type or something weird, we'll always give you an error, but we still generate mock data based on the schema. So you'll always still have data. And let's do summary of sales by year. So I'm just going to click select data. And here we're automatically giving you the data, the fields, and then of course the join fields. I'll click done, and that's all I need to do. So now if I go over to my data tab, I've got Northwind ng-conf, and I'm just going to bind it to customers. So now this is the bound data coming from Azure right in App Builder. If I click run, boom, this is the customer table. This is the code to actually do it. We generate a service API and call to do this. And, you're done. You're done at this point. Now I can generate this code, kind of do whatever I want. But this chart, if I go here, we can also bind to some chart. How about summary of sales by year? Here we've got a bunch of different orders. If I click edit data fields, you can always modify things by doing an aggregate on something like an order ID or a subtotal. Maybe I want to edit this, and let's get rid of order ID. I'll just do subtotal. Probably not the best data, but what this editor will let you do is, again, bind to any API and then link in with any aggregate that you might want to do. So it's actually pretty slick. Maybe this is a better one, or maybe this one's worse. But anyway, you don't have to write any code. This is all done for you. So now if I go back to my master view here and we look at main, what I did here is George generated a list view inside of Figma. So he had a bunch of individual items there. I deleted those individual items and I just bound this to a data source called company feed. So company feed then has different fields that I want to connect to. So you've got this idea here where you connect to a field. So in this case, if I wanted to connect to stock symbol, so now I'm connected to stock symbol and it shows up here. And you can see that now all of these are updated from that MDT to a data bound field. I did the same thing over here with the grid. I bound it to a positions field for my FinTech 75 data source. And what I did on these individual items is because we're all of our data binding today is like repeater controls. So I know that when I implement my master detail in Angular code, when I click on one of these guys, I need to update this with whatever field is coming from my Angular app. And I went ahead and did that. I'm going to show you how that works. So once I was all done with this, I did exactly what George did. I published this to GitHub. So my Northwind Open FinTrader was on GitHub. The nice thing is as I made changes, like maybe I swapped out some words, made things look a little bit different. Every time you publish, it's a pull request, as George showed. So my changes were constantly updated. And I ended up in GitHub with the same app. So this is my Open FinTrader. And this is obviously the completed app because there's a little bit more code here. So what code did I actually write to get all of this working? So if I go over to the main component, which is that main screen, I'll highlight some of the code that I wrote. So the app builder itself handles creating all of the data binding and pulling in the service data. So it wrote all of the code that was necessary to connect to that endpoint, pull that endpoint in, and then bind to the controls. What I wrote was some of the more specific things to my application. So I needed to clone the data coming in so I could always get like the first one, the selected one, etc. So I added a little bit of code on init. And then on click, when I clicked that item, what I wanted to do was something custom where when you selected an item, the color changed. So we changed the CSS based on the color. And then I tracked what was clicked previous and all that. So I would change that back to the correct background color. I also added a little code on the text box to just filter out the stock symbol. So when I typed in a symbol and I hit enter, it filtered the list, which, isn't really necessary. But if you have thousands of items, you might want to do that. And then when I selected an item, every time I'm selecting an item, I've got update chart. And you'll notice here that I'm calling update chart and I'm passing it the item that's clicked. And that item that's clicked is going to have the company name, the stock symbol, the volume, and the close price. And then I'm going to pull that data out and I'm going to populate the rest of my, my screen. And then on the other screens, like, I'll show you the HTML in a second, but there's really not much here. So to view the dashboards is just a few lines of code. Well, just because we have a very simple API to do this stuff. Basically, I'm pulling in the name of the dashboard, and based on the name, or I'm pulling in the name of either the query string or the URL. And based on whether it's a query string or a URL, I am going to do some magic there to make kind of the right dashboard show up. So these are fairly straightforward, fairly simple screens that don't do much. But if we go back to main.html, I'll just highlight a few things here. So this is my input. So that's the box that I'm typing. And I showed you on search clicked, and I'm just grabbing the search input.value, and that event is firing off. Now, if I scroll down a bit, you can see that the IGX list item has a little bit of code here. And this is where I'm doing the on item clicked. I'm passing in the item that was loaded into that list. And then either I'm going to give a router link on the little button to open up my dashboard, or I'm setting the correct CSS for the green background that I have. Then if I scroll down, you can see all of the other string interpolation here for the data binding. That's this I did add. So I added this as well to make sure that when I clicked on my master, all of the detail actually showed up nicely. And you can see it's just kind of the same stuff, all the fields repeated over and over again. And if we scroll down, my chart was there, so I didn't have to do much there. I did change the data source to the selected item. So that was part of update chart. And then I scroll down here and there's really not much else. It's just a bunch of HTML. There's some button clicks and things like that. Like here is the button to go view the dashboard at the top. This is just some more data binding here. Let me Control Z that. And then I have my grid on the right-hand side. And so that grid has a cell template. And all I'm doing is putting a up, down, or an up or a down arrow based on my if statement. If it's less than 0 or greater than 0. I added this template myself. However, the grid is getting updated right now where you can add that template yourself right in App Builder. So once all this is done, which literally took hours, not days, to do this because it's fairly simple stuff, we end up with this application. So here's my bound data, like so. I'm selecting these items. Update chart is getting called. So it's updating my chart. You can see all this information is being updated. This grid's not doing anything. It's just sort of my position. So they never change, or at least not in my app. They're not changing. If I do my on click and I type in like NTech and I hit the enter key, NTech pops up. Here is my other item in that template, which is opening up the dashboard. If I go back to my nav, I'm back here to the screen. I also had an on-click event for this button to show the same thing. Now, what's interesting here is you'll notice this dashboard looks the same, but I'm passing in a query parameter. UNH. And what it's doing is it's actually just filtering out all the data to just pick up this UNH ticker. So now if I go back to like FTXG and I click this, oh, well, that's not right. Let's try that again. FTXG. Okay, there we go. Maybe a little bug in my code there, but now FTXG showed up and it's picking it up from here. Now, if I go over to this screen, it's just going to do a straight up dashboard. If I go here where I have this repeater control, and let's say I open up the inventory dashboard, I click open. Now it's going to open up a completely different dashboard. I'm just passing in inventory and it's going to load up that data and show it on the screen. It's a little slow because it's another, it's warming up my Azure database, but you can see this is a nice dashboard that looks great and super easy to build with drag and drop. And of course, this is all using Angular. Now, if I go back to OpenFinTrader, I've got child view here. I had this grid, which George showed. I'm going to go ahead and delete this guy and delete this guy. Now my grid's taking up the full screen. If I go over to features on the grid, this is how you add all of those features. So I'm just adding all the things that I want this grid to do. So I want it to do everything. So pinning, grouping, resizing, column summaries, everything. And so I've added all these features. And now if I want to change some of those features, there's little hyperlinks here. So for example, for paging, maybe I want my page size to be 100. So now my page size is 100. For row selection, maybe I want single row selection, not multi-row selection. For pinning, maybe I want to by default pin the contact name to the left. So now contact name is pinned to the left. So I can set up and configure all this. But again, you're not writing any of this code. It's being written for you. So you kind of get all this stuff for free with App Builder. And let's say you already have an app that's built. You just want to add a new screen. Add a new screen in App Builder, right click, copy, go to your app, paste it in, and then you kind of have the same experience. So pretty cool stuff. Running out of time. It looks like George is handling all of the questions here that are coming in. I'll answer one here. What's the advantage of an App Builder local install versus cloud-based? App Builder is a cloud solution. It's a SaaS-based solution. So you're in the cloud. Everything's happening in the cloud. If you have on-prem data, we still work with on-prem. So you can have a local host for your Swagger. That's fine too. But everything really is happening up into the cloud. Can you publish to GitLab? No, we support GitHub today. GitLab is on the roadmap. So with that, let me jump back into the remainder of my slides and we will wrap this up. So we did the demo. So what's the call to action? Please try out App Builder today. Go to appbuilder.dev. Hopefully you were blown away by how easy it is to get started, but it's about time savings and productivity. Last week, there was an article that Satya Nadella was talking about AI, and the interviewer was like, well, AI, it's going to replace jobs. And he said, well, AI really makes everyone's job more enjoyable. It removes the drudgery of your daily work if the AI is helping you get this stuff done. And I look at so much of the code that we have to write is like drudgery. And if you're not a front-end expert, not a CSS expert, HTML expert, this is where tools like App Builder shine. You can look like a hero in a day. Start with a template, start with a full app, whatever, any of our samples, and just get going. And very quickly, you can have something to demonstrate in an hour versus a day or a week. And we're continuing to add these features to App Builder. So I'm really pumped about Master Detail coming in the next, 6 to 8 weeks. That column templates I showed you, we implemented CRUD. So you have this full round robin data entry experience now in App Builder. It's a very exciting tool and the roadmap is super exciting. We're 100% committed to Angular. I think Angular 16 released a few days ago. Everything's already updated to Angular 16, our Ignite UI products on Angular 16. So we are always up to date with what's happening on the Angular side. And of course, we will have a booth at ng-conf. Our resident expert, Brian Lagunas, will be there at the booth. If you have any questions about App Builder, Angular, any of our products, he'll be there with the rest of the team to talk about that. So if you're not going to ng-conf, buy a ticket today. It's going to be a great time, and you'll learn about all kinds of stuff that Infragistics is doing along with others. So I want to thank Q and Gene for inviting us today, and George, especially for his demo. And that's all we had, Q. I don't know if you wanted to wrap it up with anything else, but thanks again.